Hello and welcome to my video today. Today I'm going to teach you how to make cultured butter. So when I first started making cultured butter, I couldn't find all the information that I was interested in to help make it better. So I've decided to do this video so that you can learn things I've learned over the time I've been making cultured butter. So today we're going to learn firstly how to culture the butter. Then we're going to learn how to squeeze the buttermilk out of the butter so that you have nice, soft, cultured butter. And then we're going to learn how to wash the butter to make sure that we've got all of the buttermilk out of the butter. So what do we need to make our cultured butter? So we need a few utensils to get going. We need a sieve to drain the buttermilk. We need a spatula. We need a couple of bowls to use along the way. We need a pair of scales. We need a food processor or something to churn the cream in. We need a set of cheese spoons, which give you a very small measuring amount for the culture. We need our cream. We need a mould to put our butter in. We need some iced water, which can be made with some blocks of ice and water out of the tap, or it can be chilled in the fridge. We need something to put our buttermilk in when we're finished. We need our culture, and today I'm using Flora Danica, which you can buy from any cheese shop, and that's the same culture that's used for camembert, brie and cream cheese and sour cream. And we just need something small to mix the culture in with some water. So now we're going to learn how to culture the butter. To culture the butter, you really need to set that aside 24 hours before you want to make the butter. That's to give it time for the cream to culture. So what we need to do is get our food processor bowl, or any bowl that you've got that you want to set it aside in, and fill that with your cream. I always use 1200 mils of cream because that gives me about 500 grams of butter. Slightly over, but enough to make a few recipes out of 500 grams. So there's one. Now I like to use my food processor bowl because then I don't have to wash another bowl later, and that's quite simple. So we need to get our culture. Now the culture is very fine powder. This is what our culture looks like close up. And we need to mix that with some water so that it can sit inside the cream. So we just need what they call a smidgen of culture. So this one is from one of our cheese spoons, and they're much smaller than a teaspoon or a quarter of a teaspoon. So you just need that amount, and mix that in with a little cup of water. Just let that dissolve. And then we just need to pour that into the cream. Just give that a little mix around. And then the cream needs to be covered. So I just use my processor lid. That goes. And then you need to set that aside for 12 to 16 hours. So just put it in a warm place in your kitchen and leave that overnight or during the day. And then once you've left that for 12 to 16 hours, pop it in the fridge for about 4 hours to cool it down, because the cream will churn better if it's cooled. So now we're going to churn the butter to make the cream. So this is one I prepared earlier. It's been culturing overnight, and it's been sitting in the fridge now for about 5 or 6 hours. So it's nice and cold, so it will churn much better and be easier to work with. So we'll just pop that onto the food processor and we'll turn it on. Now it's going to be very noisy, so I will talk over it for a moment, but then we'll let it churn and I'll come back to it later. It takes about 7 as it starts to turn to butter at the different stages. This is the cream after it's been churning for about 1 minute. You can see how it's starting to thicken. And here you can see the cream is getting to the point where it's starting to separate and the buttermilk is going to start coming out of it. Starting to get stuck in the processor, so it's time to open it up and have a look. Here you can see the buttermilk has come away from the butter and there's plenty of buttermilk there. If you give it a squeeze, you can see it coming out of the butter and getting lots more buttermilk out of it. At this point I probably beat it for about another 30 seconds and then I start to take it out of the processor and start to work on it. Okay, so now our cream is ready to separate from the buttermilk. And this is where the messy part, but the fun part begins. So let's just clean up the processor a little bit. Okay. Now we can get our bowl and our sieve. And we can start to put our buttermilk, pour our buttermilk into the sieve. And the sieve will keep the butter out of the buttermilk. Catch that at the bottom. And if we just squeeze away, we'll get lots of buttermilk coming out. Okay, and so then I like to take about half of the butter out of the processor because it's easier to work with half and you get a better result. You're able to squeeze out more buttermilk. So then you need to grab it with your hands and squeeze. So obviously make sure that your hands are clean first. And you can see all the buttermilk just dripping out down into the sieve. And there's quite a lot coming out at the moment. So we need to work on that. It takes about 3 minutes, maybe a bit less than that, to get the buttermilk out. And if the butter is nice and cold, then it's not going to stick to your hands and make a huge mess. So we'll keep working on the buttermilk, getting that out. You need to get the buttermilk out to make the butter last longer, otherwise you'll have some issues with it. It might go off earlier. The other thing is it might go all dry and crumbly even though it's still got a bit of milk in it. So it's really important to get all of the buttermilk out so that you have a better quality butter. And you can see we've still got lots of milk coming out of it at this stage, but it's getting less and less. We just knead it, squeeze it, and wait until we see no more buttermilk dripping out, which we're getting there. It's nearly time. Alright, we're nearly there. Okay. Alright, so there's a little bit dripping off my hands. We'll do a nice close-up of this, so when I squeeze it, I'm still getting a little bit of milk coming out of it. So we'll need to squeeze it just for a little bit longer. Might be at the point where we have no more milk coming out of it. It's looking quite dry but glistening at the same time. So that's how we take out our buttermilk. The next step is to wash the butter. So usually I do this over the sink, but this time I'm just going to do it here over a bowl. So we get our ice water and we pour the ice water over the butter. And what that will do is wash out any of the buttermilk that's still sitting inside the butter or around the butter, and we squeeze that water out. Now if we have a look at our water, we can see it's a little bit cloudy. So what we want to do is the water needs to be clear when we wash it over. It's a bit hard to tell here because I can't empty it out. But if I was in the sink, I would empty it and I'd be able to see when the water was clear. So just a few more squeezes. And that's looking quite clear to me. It usually doesn't take a lot of washing at this point. I like to do it 3 times. You'll get lots of splashes all over the bench. So don't worry about that, that's just normal. Okay, so that looks about ready to me. And this is our butter. When it's got all the buttermilk squeezed out of it, and it's starting to soften a little bit because my hands are warm. So the last thing I like to do after I've made my butter is I like to put it in to my mould. And I use just a little cake tin mould, and I like to weigh it and put it into 250 gram blocks. So I put a piece of paper in there, baking paper in there, just to make it easier to take out. And I pop that in, and so far I've got 305 grams of butter. So I'll just take out a little bit to make it 250. Okay, so that's 250 grams of butter. And I just squeeze that into my mould, into whatever shape. You can use anything you like for your butter mould. And if you don't have a mould, you can just wrap it in paper, baking paper, and roll it or make it a shape that you like, and then wrap it in the baking paper. Afterwards, when the butter has set, which takes a couple of hours until it's gone cold, it's great to put it into some cheese paper. So that's our cheese paper that we looked at earlier, and we just wrap that up. That's the same paper that we use for brie. Keeps the butter nice and fresh in the fridge and keeps the moisture in so that it doesn't dry out too much. So that's the simple way to make cultured butter. So first I took you through how to make the culture. So I've still got the one that we did earlier culturing over on the stove, so that'll be ready to make up tomorrow. Then we looked at how we squeeze out the buttermilk. So I've still got lots of buttermilk coming out of here, and I can show you how much buttermilk we get out of the butter. So that's 500 mils. I probably, out of the remaining butter that I've got, I'll probably get about another 100 mils. So I usually get about 500 to 600 mils out of one batch of butter, or two lots of cream. And then finally we washed the butter. So it's a bit of a messy process. Even after you've washed the butter, you still have a little bit on your hands, but it's not quite nice and soft, and you can rub that into your hands and a bit of moisturiser for you. So that's it. At this point, before you put it in the mould, you can flavour your butter if you like. You can add salt, you can make a vanilla butter, garlic butter, any of those things before you go and set it in the fridge. So that's my tutorial today on how to make cultured butter. So I'd love it if you could leave some comments, and if you've got any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you for watching.